السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Respected teachers, brothers and sisters from around the world, hopefully inshallah, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar by An Nasihah Publications, and today we have a pertinent topic, a topic that I'm sure everyone would like to hear about, and I'd like to think that inshallah today's session will be hugely beneficial for the teachers everywhere across the board. As today we have a wonderful guest with us. We have with us Sheikh Mohammed Patel, who's a child safeguarding consultant, having worked, mashallah, in many madaaris, makatib, many schools across the country, across the UK, having a vast amount of experience in the field of safeguarding children in education, and also looking at online safety right now when everything has gone online, making sure that children are kept safe in those situations as well. Inshallah, there's much to learn and much to take away from today. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this a beneficial session, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this from all of us. And just to give you a bit of a background about An Nasihah, I'm going to take 1 or 2 minutes inshallah just to let you know what this webinar is part of. So alhamdulillah, this webinar has been organized by An Nasihah, as you would know, and this webinar is a part of many services that An Nasihah Publications offers, and of which some of them are related directly to the teachers, some of them to students, and some of them to the management of maktabs and madrasas and Islamic schools. As you can see from this screen in front of you, alhamdulillah, there's many areas that An Nasihah Publication covers in order to make life easy and enjoyable for children in studying their deen, and for teachers in teaching the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is part of the CPD teacher training sessions that we like to run for teachers around the country and also around the globe. We ask you to pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts all of these endeavors, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to continue serving the needs of the community, of the children, and of the teachers, especially across the world. And this teacher training, it is inshallah going to have a certificate that we're going to give out. There will be a link that will be shared later on that you'll be able to visit in order to answer some questions regarding today's session, and then you will be able to obtain a digital certificate for yourself. So that's all that's going to be from me, inshallah. If you'd like to learn more about An Nasihah, then I'd like you to visit our website, which is annasihah.com, and inshallah you'll find out much more about An Nasihah, or give us a call or WhatsApp, and we'll be happy to help you out, inshallah. And without taking much more time, I'd like to inshallah introduce Maulana Muhammad, Sheikh Muhammad, who is inshallah going to take you to inshallah through the safeguarding training.
Safeguarding consultant who primarily works with schools in Leicester and Leicestershire, madaaris and masajid. And over the last 2 years, I have worked with schools and madrasas up and down the country in helping them and supporting them in implementing safeguarding policies, procedures, and systems within their organizations, and also providing some training for madrasa staff, as well as designated leads and trustees. The purpose of this afternoon, or this evening even, is to look at how we can teach safely online. Many masajid and madaris up and down the country, when the government announced the lockdown processes, madaris and masajid immediately moved towards teaching online. Now, when they did that, some masajid or madaris were able to put in place systems and procedures. Others may not have been able to do so. The purpose of today is to look at some of the points that you may want to consider as part of your safeguarding of children whilst your staff are teaching online via Zoom, MS Teams, or any other online platform. Whilst I am talking, if you have any questions, please send your questions via WhatsApp to 07414 044 561. Inshallah, I will aim to answer as many questions as I can at the end of the presentation. So before we even begin to teach children online on any platform, it's very, very important that we consider these 8 points that I have outlined. We need to think about what is our policy. We need to think about what technology we will be using and what training, if any, will we be providing to our staff. We need to think about the location where this teaching will be provided from and what the environment will be like. We need to think about what is being taught and how it's being taught. There's a massive element of safeguarding to be considered. We need to think about online peer-on-peer abuse. We need to think about online behavior of children. And last but not least, we need to think about recording and personal data and how that's being captured and what is our process and procedures for recording and for then how long can we maintain or hold on to that information. So the first thing we need to think about is that anybody who's teaching from home should be familiar with the madrasa's various policies. The madrasa will have a safeguarding policy. The madrasa will have acceptable usage policy. The madrasa should have a GDPR policy, and the madrasa will have to have a code of conduct. These things should have been in place prior to lockdown or anything like that, because these are our day-to-day policies that we should have in place when working with children and young people. Once we've moved to an online platform, what we need to think about is how do we adapt these policies to cover online teaching and online education? And that's a very, very big question, because sometimes to discuss things, we'll see we were able to speak to people in person. Now, senior leaders aren't in the classroom, don't have access to the classroom, aren't aware of what's being said or what's being taught or how children are behaving. So the policies are very, very important. So it's very important, step number one, that all the policies that we have, that we were using on a day-to-day basis or that apply to us on a day-to-day basis are changed or are adapted to meet the requirements of online training, or online teaching, sorry. Secondly, what you'd also need to consider are risk assessments. It's very easy to say that we're going to move something onto an online platform, but have we considered the risks? Have we considered liability? Have we considered the pitfalls? What could go wrong? And then have we thought of putting in place steps and measures to help reduce that risk or mitigate that risk? So risk assessments are very, very important for madrasas, for any organization which is providing any sort of activity online. Number two, who is leading the remote learning aspect of your madrasa? Do you have a figurehead? Do you have someone who is overall responsible that you can go to for technical questions, issues that you may be facing, things that may be going wrong whilst you're teaching? So a single point of contact. Now, in some madrasas, that might be the head teacher. In other madrasas, it might not be the head teacher, and it might be a support member of staff. So it's very, very important that we identify who that lead person is. Number three, protocols for supervision. How are we going to supervise that teaching? Every teacher will be taught independently or will be teaching independently from their homes. So how are we going to supervise those lessons? Will we be dropping in from time to time? Will we be checking up on what's being taught or how it's being taught? Will we be going into the virtual classroom to listen to the lesson being taught And then will teachers have an opportunity to discuss these things with a senior leader after the lesson has been delivered? Staff absence and cover. How will staff absence be covered? If teachers are absent for a day, if they become ill themselves with COVID or any other illness, how will or who will be taking over that lesson? How will parents be notified if the details of the online platform change or the classroom changes? And all those things, those protocols need to be put in place prior to any online teaching. Supplementary provisions. Now, in your class, on a normal day, prior to COVID, we had extra provision or extra support for a child who was vulnerable or a child who had additional learning needs. How are we going to meet those needs on an online platform? How are we going to provide that additional support to that child? Is that something that we have considered? And is that a provision we are able to put in place? And the last point that you need to consider as part of your policy is one-to-one tuition permitted on behalf of the madrasa? Do we have that facility within our online platform to say, I will be teaching child X on a one-to-one basis? Can that happen? Is that permissible according to the madrasa's policy? And if it is, what is the protocol for that one-to-one teaching? The second thing we need to consider is technology and training. What platform will the madrasa be using? So lots of madrasas move to Zoom. Some madrasas use Google Classroom. Other madrasas have used Microsoft Teams. And some madrasas have used different sort of platforms. So some madrasas I've heard, though I don't know of any personally, are using WhatsApp to call a parent's phone, speak to the child and have the lesson there. So different madrasas are using different systems. Whatever system we're using, we're going to have to be mindful that in some households, we will have 2, 3, 4, 5 children from that same household who attend our madrasas. So will the family have access to 5 different apparatus to be able to do the online teaching and learning? Internet connection. Does do every family have internet provision? We're all aware that during the current crisis or pandemic, many people have lost their jobs. Many people's income is no longer there. And internet, which some people may seem as a luxury, may no longer be there for some families. So what is the provision for those families that don't have access to either the technology or are able to participate online? They might have a laptop, but they don't have internet coverage. So what solutions will the madrasa be able to provide? Have we thought about, is the madrasa able to loan a device? Number one. We will be providing a different mechanism for that child to engage in their learning. Can it be phone calls? Can it be video calling? How will we supplement that child's learning who doesn't have access to either technology or the internet? Also, we need to think about activities. How do we engage children, especially in things like Quran activities? Because usually in a madrasa, and I may be wrong, but usually in a madrasa, you have one child praying to the teacher, whilst the other children in a classroom are sat learning their own pieces of work. But in an online platform, how do we focus on one child? How will that activity be done to engage others? Also, if we're teaching fiqh, seerah, aqidah, tariq, how will we engage children? What type of activities will work on an online platform? If you have technical difficulties whilst teaching, who's your point of contact? Who will be providing you support? Security is very, very important. Zoom very quickly realized that its security wasn't up to scratch, and as a result had to make several changes and adapt its platform to make sure children and adults who were teaching and learning were safe. So think about, if you are using Zoom, waiting rooms, passwords, locking the room once everybody's in there. So all these things need to be considered, and advice provided and guidelines provided to the teachers prior to the online teaching and learning starting. Training for staff. It's very, very different teaching online to when it's teaching in person. I'm used to delivering training on a face-to-face basis. I've never ever delivered training on an online platform. Yet here I am sat talking to a screen, and I can't see the reaction of the people I'm talking to. So it becomes a very different atmosphere, and you have to change your methodology, you have to change your approach, and you have to make your message very concise so people understand it. So what sort of training has been provided for staff? I'm aware of some madrasas where teachers have practice delivering online lessons with one another to get familiar with the aspect of teaching online. And then you might think, well, I'm at home, I have access to the internet, so I might want to use a YouTube video, or I might want to show my children something else, which normally I don't have the ability to do. But is the online content suitable? Have you preloaded the YouTube video so it just plays rather than the advert? So you have to think about all of that as well. So this is all needs to be in place prior to the teaching happening within the teaching happening online. Then we move to, if teachers are teaching live, video and audio is being used, we need to think about what location we're using within our homes. Should a teacher be in their bedroom? Do you want children in their bedroom whilst a teacher is teaching them? So we need to give advice to parents and teachers, both around where they should be situated within the home based on what space they have, and where children should be. Sometimes we may use something like Zoom, where you can mute children or block video cameras until they are actually required. And it's very difficult to know what is best or what works best. Every teacher will say, this works best for me. What you need to be familiar, what you need to think about is whatever space you use within your home to teach a lesson, make sure that it's a space where there's nothing that, that children could see or could cause controversy, or people walking in or children walking in or anything like that. What you want to do is try and have a quiet space from where you can talk and deliver your lesson. You might also need to consider the facility for senior leaders from the madrasa to be able to drop into online lessons. So in the madrasa that I work at, we had the opportunity to drop into teachers' lessons to oversee exactly what's being taught, but also see how children are behaving, because it can become quite difficult to manage that classroom on an online platform. Think about firewalls and filtering. Some people may be using laptops which have certain firewalls which don't allow for certain applications to be used. So think about how you can build that in. If madrasas have provided teachers with devices, then the madrasas may be able to put in certain firewalls and filtering to ensure the safety of their teachers and their children. Supervision. Do you want children to be in a room on their own, or is the advice to parents that another adult should be present whilst that teaching is happening? So they don't need to be on the screen with the child, but should be in the vicinity of where that child is learning and engaging. What we saw when we were teaching online is there was a few students who on the first few days, their parents weren't in the vicinity. So as a result, the child was misbehaving. We got in contact with the parents and said to them, no, you have to be sat in the room. There has to be some sort of supervision. Otherwise, on an online platform, for the teacher to concentrate on 15, 16 students, as well as teach, is quite difficult. It's very difficult compared to having those 15, 16 children present in a classroom. And like I said, consider your background. Think about what people can see around you and you want to make sure that there's nothing there which could distract a child or draw their attention away from the teaching and learning that is happening. Then education and teaching. The madrasa needs to be very, very clear about behavioral expectations, and the first lesson should be used to reinforce appropriate boundaries with the students. Also, my advice would be to setting out some guidelines with parents, either via email, WhatsApp messages, through the madrasa website, however you communicate with parents. Say, these are our guidelines for our online lessons, and these are our expectations of students with regards to behavior. Think about that. It's now been nearly 11 weeks since children have been in lockdown. It's only this week that they've been actually, according to government guidelines, have been allowed out to engage with 5 people who aren't from their household. So consider the impact that this is having on children. Think about engagement with parents. Are you engaging with them every day? Are you engaging with them weekly? Are you sending out email shots, newsletters, WhatsApp messages? Think about issues that teachers have faced already, and how can you mitigate those issues or risks? Can you put things in place? Are you able to provide some sort of training to help and support your teachers teach online? And then your timetable. Think about your timetable. Is it suitable to have children sitting there for 2 hours learning and engaging, or will there be a 15-minute break and then they'll come back? How's that going to be done? I deliver training for a living, and we've had to break our training down into 3 different sessions to keep people engaged, because when they're in a room in front of you and there's other colleagues to talk to and engage with, that's possible. But when you're on your own at home, the dynamics change. And as a result, it can become very lonely and people can lose interest. So think about your timetable. What works? What's your time frames? Also, you want to think about, do staff contact parents directly, or are still all communications made through the madrasa? Do you have senior leaders who can be contacted by parents if there are any queries or issues? Think about guidance of conduct of teachers and of pupils. You might have to put together new guidance for online teaching. Give guidance to teachers about what locations they should use at home, what clothing they should be wearing, backgrounds in the video streams. If you're able to blur out your backgrounds, then try that. Think about your privacy protocols. So to make sure that people in the teacher's household aren't coming on to the video stream or walking by whilst you're teaching. Think about screen-based and non-screen-based activities. So think about how you can teach fiqh differently. Can you set activities for children to complete and then show you, or is there work that they can do outside of the madrasa hours and then submit via online platforms to the madrasa? Think about reasonable deadlines for students when it comes to activities and work. And think about, is it possible to change or alter your timetable? We as a madrasa had reduced hours during Ramadan, and then we slowly increased our timetable outside of Ramadan to sort of increase gradually rather than jump straight away from an hour madrasa to 2-hour madrasa. So these are some of the points that the madrasas can consider. And then one of the biggest aspects for madrasas to consider is safeguarding. Whole madrasa approach to safeguarding. All activities should have an element of safeguarding attached to it. Staff members should be aware of who the madrasa's designated safeguarding leads are. Staff members should be aware that whilst they're teaching online, a child may say something, a child may message them using the chat function on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Classrooms. Teachers may receive emails if they've provided an email address for themselves to the children. Teachers may overhear things that are being said in the background whilst the child is learning. So all these things will have to be built into the guidance that is provided to your teachers. But ultimately, you must remind your staff members that they have a safeguarding obligation towards children and young people. Any safeguarding incidents or potential concerns should be reported according to the madrasa safeguarding policy. The madrasa should share the details or contact details of the designated lead for the madrasa and the deputy designated lead. Is there a form that teachers will be required to complete? Where is that form? How is that form accessed? Who is that form submitted to? How soon after an incident will that form be required to be submitted? How is that contact made? All these things will need to be considered within the guidance that is provided to teachers prior to teaching online. Should designated leads or deputy designated leads be available for the duration of the online teaching? So for the 2 hours that madrasa is being taught online, should the designated lead or a deputy be available? Will there be a rota in place? So on Monday, it's so-and-so, on Tuesday, so-and-so, on Wednesday, so-and-so. So teachers are aware of who to contact immediately if they have a concern. The last thing you want is teachers have a concern and then they're trying to get in touch with somebody and that person's busy or preoccupied or that person is ill themselves. So who is that deputy? Those contact, the lines of communication have to be very, very clear. Updating the safeguarding policy to bring them in line with the COVID guidance is very, very important. And it's very important that teachers are made aware of the amendments to the safeguarding policy so they're aware of what the madrasa has changed. And update the code of conduct. The behaviors, risks have changed. What may be a risk or potential danger in a classroom may not be a potential risk and danger while somebody's teaching online, but then you have additional risks when a teacher is teaching online. So it's very, very important that your code of conduct is changed or is amended to cover online teaching, language, behavior, clothing, personal details. Can a teacher provide their mobile phone number? Should a teacher be using his or her personal email address for students to contact them? Or should a madrasa have email addresses for each and every one of their teachers and staff members that they can email, that children can use, but also the madrasa can monitor? The madrasa should consider that are staff aware that online bullying is a potential safeguarding issue? Children can chat to one another on Zoom without the teacher knowing. They can privately message one another. Similarly, on Microsoft Teams and on other safeguarding platforms. Children may be WhatsApping one another whilst the teacher is teaching. And the potential for online peer-on-peer abuse is massive. Have we made parents aware of who to contact if they're worried about any potential bullying incidents or peer-on-peer abuse incidents online? Do they know who the responsible person within our madrasa is and how to report a concern? And how will the madrasa deal with any bullying incidents which originate at home? What's our policy? So maybe your anti-bullying policy might need to change to cover bullying that originates at home and is happening online without the children being present within your facility or within your physical institute. This is all happening online. So how will you deal with those bullying incidents? Will staff require any further training to help and support them with online bullying or online peer-on-peer abuse if they're made aware of it by a teacher or a parent or a staff or a child? How will the madrasa provide support to the child, to the parent, to the teacher? And has the madrasa again updated its safeguarding policy to cover online bullying and peer-on-peer abuse? Online behavior. Think about children understand that what policies apply to them. Children understand that when they're physically in a classroom, there's an expected level of behavior. They understand the madrasa's behavior policy. They understand the teacher's expectation of them with regards to behavior. That this is how I am expected to behave. And if I don't behave, these are the consequences. These are the sanctions that the madrasa has that they can use. Now I'm being taught online. Many children may be under the impression that I can't. How's the teacher going to sanction me? So the expected level of behavior isn't there. I can do what I want. I can switch my microphone on, I can talk to somebody, I can switch my video off and do something else. So what is the expected level of behavior for each child? Consider as part of your guidance to parents that who is responsible for what pupils are doing during lesson times. That's why parental supervision is very, very important. Because if you leave a child on their own and there's 15, 16 of their friends on a screen that they haven't seen for a while, it's very easy for a child to become distracted. So consider who is responsible. Think about the madrasa's behavior policy if you have one. How is that behavior policy going to be enforced? Think about sanctions. Think about the chat aspect of the online platform. Think about the possibility that children may be able to record the screen as the teacher is teaching and then use that outside of the madrasa's online platform and share it with their friends to make memes or tease or make fun of a teacher, for example, which we've seen. So what are your sanctions for misbehavior? Guidelines for pupils and for teachers. And then your behavior record. Who's going to keep that record and how is that going to be shared with senior leaders? That this is what happened in my class today. I need to make my senior leader aware of it. They can then make the parent aware of it. So that line of communication with regards to a child who may be disruptive when you're teaching online, who may be acting silly or doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So how is that going to be reported to a senior leader? And then how is that going to be communicated to a parent? And how is that child then going to be sanctioned? These are all points that need to be considered. And then last but not least, but very, very important in the current climate, GDPR policies. How much personal data is being shared? Should the teacher be using his or her own email address to create accounts on Zoom, or will the madrasa create an account for each teacher and give them the login details? So how is that going to be done? Will each lesson be recorded? Because if a parent complains to say a teacher said this or did this, will the madrasa have a recourse to access the recording of that lesson, to look at, to listen to, and then make a determination of exactly what happened? Do staff have to give their consent for personal data to be or personal information to be recorded? Think about lesson start time and end time, registers. Make sure that every day it's logged that lesson started at this time, lesson finished at this time, and these were the children that attended, and child A, B, or C left early or came late to that lesson. And like I mentioned already, be clear about whether it's acceptable for students to record events. And what about onward sharing? Should children be sharing any recorded content? If you are recording the lesson, make sure parents and children are aware that lessons are being recorded. Ensure that parents and children and teachers are all aware that how long these recordings will be kept, how to access them, for what purpose they're being used, and under what conditions the provider may be using them. So you have to be very, very clear about lessons being recorded, where they're being stored, why they're being recorded, and how long you're going to be storing them for. Does the madrasa have a data controller whose overall responsibility is to oversee the data protection and GDPR policy of the madrasa? Has the madrasa updated its GDPR policy to cover online teaching? And making sure that parents are aware and children are aware of the risks and benefits of online lessons, and making sure that we're getting written consent from parents for their children being involved in online teaching. It's very, very important that we make sure that we have something in writing that confirms that parents are giving their consent for their child to be involved in the online platform. Okay. So that's the complete presentation. It's not very long. Hopefully I've covered most key aspects. We do have several questions here. So what I'm going to try and do is run through these questions. Is the teacher allowed to give their personal number? Ideally not. Ideally, teachers should not be giving their personal details to parents or to children. All communication should be via the madrasa. So parents should be made aware that any questions, any queries should be directed to the madrasa, which then can be forwarded to the teacher. That's why I said that if you do want to open a line of communication with parents, students, then ideally the madrasa can set up madrasa emails for the madrasa teachers, which then can be monitored. But providing your own phone number, WhatsApp number, etc., it's not something I would advise even in a pre-COVID or post-COVID world. Teachers should refrain from sharing their personal number with children and with teachers. Someone said, what is the safeguarding stance on the following? Can I have one-to-one learning sessions with my pupil? That is for the madrasa to decide its overall policy. If teachers are going to be providing one-to-one teaching and learning, then the madrasa will have to think about certain safeguards about what and how that's going to be done. Secondly, the individual has asked, can you chat? Can I use the chat facility with one of my pupils? Again, that will be according to your madrasa's policy. Now, in some madrasas, they may not allow one-to-one teaching. They might think that's not appropriate. In others, they may say, yes, you can do one-to-one teaching, but it has to be in the presence of an adult or a parent or a carer. So it's the madrasa's decision about how to do that best. A question here is, if a person is teaching independently of any organization, then who would be the DSL? Then I would suggest that a person who is the person running this independent club would become the designated person for safeguarding. Yes, they would need some sort of safeguarding policy. And yes, parents and children should be made aware of what that safeguarding policy is. So a question here, how will the safeguarding be maintained if a pupil switches on their video and they're not appropriately dressed? Then again, that would be something that would have to be addressed immediately with a senior leader in the madrasa who can address that with the parent and carer of that child. So again, set out the guidelines beforehand about, so for example, I know my niece's madrasa is very clear about how children should be dressed for madrasa. So the same uniform that children were having on in when they were physically attending madrasa is the same uniform that children were expected to have on for online madrasa. So the madrasa was very, very clear about its guidance and guidelines around uniform, etc. So again, it's something that's something that you can have in your guidance. With regards to email addresses, if you're in a position to be able to give your students madrasa emails, specific emails, then by all means do so. That might be something you want to do for your older students. However, what I would suggest is your email is shared maybe with parents, which then allows parents to communicate with the teacher about any issues that they may have. But also, that's something that the madrasa then can have a recourse to, because they can log in and check if there's anything that they need to check. the WhatsApp calling, video calling, voice calling is something some madrasas are doing. Personally, it's not something that I am an advocate of, because it's a teacher providing their own personal number to a parent. Now, post-COVID, parents may contact the teacher and circumvent the system that the madrasa has in place for discussing concerns, behavior, etc. So it's not something that I am a big fan of. I understand that for some teachers, online platforms are difficult, but that's why we talked about training earlier on, showing them how it's done, a step-by-step guide of how to set up a platform. Or, a teacher might have to use their own child or an adult in their home who is, technology literate, who's able to help and support them in setting up that platform. Recording, I'm a big advocate of recording lessons. That gives the madrasa a recourse of going back and listening to lessons. It's quality of education as well, as a madrasa, knowing what is being taught and how it's being taught, and then using that as training later on to say, look, this lesson was taught, but as a teacher, what could you have done differently? That's a very good tool as well in itself. Not just the safeguarding aspect, from the education perspective, as a madrasa leader, having the opportunity to go back, listen to a lesson, and then sit and discuss that lesson with the teacher. But also then, if something was to happen in the classroom, it would give the madrasa an opportunity to go back, listen to the lesson or watch the lesson, and then use that in means of talking to the parent and the children. So one-to-one allegations, again, if you're using a Zoom type platform, the lesson will be recorded. So of any allegations, the madrasa would have recourse to that recording. It's when it's on WhatsApp and other sort of mobile phone, just calling and speaking to, it becomes very, very difficult, and it becomes a he said, she said. And that's why I'm not an advocate of teachers calling parents' WhatsApp numbers to listen. Legally, how should you store recordings? You need to check your GDPR policy. You'd need to make sure that your GDPR policy covers where these recordings are going to be stored. Are they going to be stored on the madrasa server? First and foremost, does the madrasa have a server? If it has a server, is this where it will be recorded? Is it being recorded on a laptop, on a single laptop? Is it being recorded on teachers' individual laptops or iPads and then being forwarded onto the madrasa? Again, I cannot advise how it's done. It's for each madrasa to decide. GDPR policy is your data protection policy. And every madrasa should have one, not just for online teaching. So the data we hold with regards to how do we engage with children, every madrasa should have a GDPR policy with regards to normal data that we store anyways, children's personal details, parents' details, emergency contacts, and all that sort of stuff. We should be doing that. Does a madrasa? No, you don't have to provide teachers with mobile phones. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is means of communicating with the madrasa. So in some madrasas, senior leaders might have phone numbers that the madrasa has provided. That the teachers, they can be contacted there. And for teachers, just having an email address that parents and children can communicate with. I think it has to be in a cost-effective way. What online platform do you think is the most effective? Again, there's several that work. We as a madrasa use Zoom. Other madrasas I know are using MS Teams. Other madrasas are using Google Classrooms. So it's what works best for you. And with Zoom, you got to remember there is a free platform, but then that might switch off after 40 minutes. So what do you do? Whereas if you purchase the education platform, which there is a cost implication, you do get access to a lot more facilities within the Zoom platform. So it's for each madrasa to investigate what works best for them to decide which platform they want to use. Yes, using apps like Class Dojo or Parent Pay or other certain apps which are school-based, classroom-based apps. It's okay for parents to communicate with teachers there. Why? Because as a madrasa, we could always go back and check about what was said and who said what. What shouldn't be used is WhatsApp or text messages. Can we block student chat facility on Microsoft Teams? I think there is a facility available on Microsoft Teams to disable the chat function. You'd have to do that through your settings prior to starting your class. And similarly, I think if you're on a paid version of Zoom, you can switch it off on Zoom as well. Yeah, I would strongly advise sending out consent forms for online teaching. Just make sure that you've got parental consent and making them aware that lessons are recorded, etc. Teenagers, anybody over the age of 18, no, you don't need parental supervision or parents being there. However, if you do have children that you are teaching, then parental supervision of some sort is advised. Safeguarding, currently, what should you be vigilant? One of the biggest worries and concerns we have is around domestic abuse. As a community, domestic abuse is a massive issue in our community, even pre-COVID. And post-COVID or during COVID, it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. It's something we're talking to schools about. It's something that we need to be aware of. Domestic abuse is probably one of the biggest issues that we are going to face post-COVID-19 when it comes to around safeguarding children. But also another issue that we are facing is children have been locked inside for 11 weeks. And a lot of children are spending an excessive amount of time online, either on online games, either on platforms like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and other platforms. And many a time, parents don't know who children are talking to, who children are engaging with. So online sort of grooming is a massive, massive risk currently as well. And we are seeing a rise in a number of those incidents as well. Can an audio clip of a HIF student reciting his revision be sent to a teacher's email address? Yes, if the email address is providing private tuition. If you're private tuition, is it okay to give personal details to students to contact their teacher in regards to lesson? Again, what I would be very, very mindful of is if you are doing private tuition, so you as an individual, you're not working under a madrasa umbrella, I would have a separate number for my private tuition. And that's what students can contact or parents can contact me on. And I would make it very clear that I can only be contacted at a certain time. And what I wouldn't want is using my private number for my private tuition as well. It mixes things up. Again, one-to-one, there's nothing wrong with one-to-one lessons with a child as long as the madrasa has provided appropriate guidance policy with regards to that. Legal side of it, what is the legal side of it? There is no legal side to it. Teachers, schools can do one-to-one. Lots of schools are doing so, for example, pastoral care on a one-to-one basis online during the current lockdown. But it's about your guidelines. It's about what systems you have in place. It's about, is a senior leader able to drop in that one-to-one session and listen in if they wanted to. So these are the type of things that you would have to consider as part of your guidance. Yes, so the question here is a very interesting question. I'm glad someone's brought that up. If a safeguarding concern arises about one of your pupils' siblings from an online session, and the sibling isn't a part of your institute, would you still report this to your own DSL? Yes, you would. Legal obligation on every adult who works with children is if they are made aware of any safeguarding concern, they are duty bound to report that concern. A failure of an adult who works with children to report a concern to a designated lead or to the authorities themselves can result in significant consequences for that adult. So it's very, very important that any concerns about the child who attends your madrasa or their siblings who may not attend your madrasa, but they are children, are reported to your designated lead immediately. Is there online teaching policy? There's loads out there. I can provide a sample. My details were at the beginning of the slide, or my details can be obtained from Maulana Qasim at An Nasihah. Disabled, I'm informed that disabled chat feature is also available on the free Zoom, free version of Zoom. How would you accommodate central? And that, so when I was talking about planning your lesson and children with vulnerabilities, this was one of the aspects that when you're doing it in your classroom physically, when you have the child in front of you, your lesson or your accommodation of children with SEN, you will have considered. Now that you move this to an online platform, you're going to have to give even more thought about how you're going to engage a child who has SEN. So for them, it may be that the madrasa has to provide that one-to-one. It may be that you have to have visual content, you have to have audio content, and you have to have separate work that you're going to have to send to the child to help and support them. So children with SEN, every lesson you deliver, you're going to have to consider how you engage that child. All the children who want to discuss sensitive issues, again, that's why I'm very much about having a platform, especially in our community where there are many, many issues around safeguarding and other issues that sometimes children want to discuss with their religious teachers or with senior members. So having a email address, safeguarding@madrasa so-and-so, pastoral@madrasa so-and-so. So having something that children can send their questions or queries or concerns to, which then can be passed on to an appropriate person within the madrasa. How to put about, so I understand many madrasas have, many madrasas are probably 11 weeks into the online teaching, and maybe this is something we should have done right at the beginning. I think you can still inform parents about without alarming them. So it's talking about that you could do it in a way that we've done it for 6, 7, 8 weeks. Ramzan has gave us an opportunity to develop some things. And as we don't know how long this online platform is going to continue, these are some of the things that the madrasa would like to clarify with regards to behavior, guidance, etc. With regards to student behavior, you could bring that up. So there's different ways of doing it. I think it can be done without alarming students. Schools are constantly sending out online safety information to parents. This is an online safety broadcast, online safety. We just made my son's secondary school constantly sends out things around online safety, probably once or twice a week even. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it can be done in a way that you're talking about, we have a number and we don't know how long this is going to continue. And at this moment in time, we don't. Madrasas probably are going to be the last things that reopen. So we're in this for the long term. So how do we best do that? How do we best engage? How do we best make parents aware that we are here for them? If they have worries about a child's progress, if they have worries about the child's behavior, if they are worried about, or if the child is worried about safeguarding, then we are here for them and they can share or they can contact us. Can a teacher call from withheld number? Again, it's for a madrasa to decide. I'm against that, but again, you can say that's from a personal perspective. I'm gonna say speak to your madrasa about that. Again, can a teacher have his students' parents' numbers saved in his phone to keep parents updated? No, not really. The madrasa should have a central phone. So as for example, in our madrasa, we have a madrasa phone number, a mobile number, which has WhatsApp, and all communications to parents is sent via that WhatsApp number. Again, there's different platforms that you can use, which allows you to send text messages to parents via apps, etc. So teachers, we really need to move away from teachers acting independently of the madrasa to keep parents informed. It has to be a single point of contact, that the madrasa is sending out this information, the madrasa is making parents informed. It takes that burden away from the teacher. Let the senior leaders who are employed or recruited to do that, let them do that part of the job. The teacher's concern should be the teaching and learning. I think this question here, how do we deal with parents who are sort of telling their child how to read the sabak whilst the teacher is trying to teach? I think that's a part of your guidance. It's about your guidance. It's about how you do that. It's about making parents aware that they're there to supervise, making sure that the child is learning and not to take part in the lesson itself. And I think that has to be sort of information given to parents as part of your guidance and guidelines. Zoom and Class Dojo would solve the issue of not saving numbers. It would. And again, I'm not an advocate of teachers communicating with parents. I've said that from the beginning. Some people might say you take a very extreme stance, possibly because of the things I see and I hear and I come across and I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Maybe my position is quite extreme. But for me, once a teacher has parents and students' phone numbers, the paths it can lead down are numerous. And I have seen in madrasas, forget schools, in madrasas, things going wrong because a teacher had a child or a parent's phone number. So I would strongly advise that there's a central point of contact in the madrasa, and then someone is making because every complaint, everything that comes in, there should be a record of those discussions. What was said, what was discussed, who was it said to, and what was the access of. Is sharing student exam results with a class against GDPR? Possibly. You'd have to look at it with someone who is more versed with GDPR than I am. What if children don't have access to devices? That's what I said right at the beginning. I think it was point number 2 or 3, technology. What can be put in place for children who don't have access to laptops, the internet? How do we engage them with the madrasa facility? Because what we don't want them to do is feel left out. And that could be especially with families that are struggling financially, that we don't want them to think, well, my mates and my friends can do madrasa, but I can't because we can't afford a laptop or iPad. So you need to think about, can the madrasa provide laptops? Does the madrasa have the ability to do that? So these are some of the points that you should consider. If there's any further questions, I'm going to wrap up here because I think it's coming to the end. But if you have any further questions, please contact myself on the details that were on the slides, or you can contact Maulana Qasim through the WhatsApp number. And also, if you want a certificate, which Maulana Qasim Sahib mentioned, then you can contact An Nasihah, and for a nominal fee and completing a quiz, we will make certificates available for individuals. Jazakumullah khair for your time. If you do require any support or help with regards to your madrasa and safeguarding, please don't hesitate to contact me on the details provided. Jazakumullah. And safeguarding, please don't hesitate to contact me on.
Jazakumullah khairan to Maulana Mohammed, mashallah. We'd like to thank him for giving us his valuable time, and we'd like to thank him for sharing the wonderful insights with us. And I'm sure there were many questions that our viewers and our listeners definitely had. Some of them maybe they are getting
it's
in their
18
mind.
hours.
Some of them they may be getting in their minds right now. Inshallah, the purpose of this presentation was to mainly go through the questions that we need to be asking as leaders of madrasas, maktabs, Islamic schools maybe as well, and to then find the potential solutions for this. There's no one template fits all solution to these kind of matters, these kind of issues. But alhamdulillah, we had wonderful advices that were shared for considerations that we need to keep in mind if we want to ensure that children are kept safe online at all times. And not only children, but teachers are kept safe online at all times from any allegations that may come their way. May Allah protect us all, protect our children, our students, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take this virus and this illness away from us so that we may be able to return to face-to-face classes where the nur and the barakah of the deen can be shared with the students in person, inshallah. And just to finish off, inshallah, we will be having some more webinars for teachers. If you have any ideas for which webinars we should be holding, which topics that we should be sharing with you, please message us. You've got the number already. If you don't have it, it's in the description of this video. And inshallah, we would like to conduct those sessions for the teachers. And along with that, if there are teachers, mashallah, on this platform at this moment in time, if you are teaching the An Nasihah books and you need the digital copies of the books, then you can sign up to nasihahworld.com. At the moment, it's still free of charge to sign up, and you will be able to get access to all of the books, all of the course books in a digital format that you can share with your students online, inshallah. Once again, Jazakumullah khairah to Sheikh Mohammed, and Jazakumullah khairah to all of the listeners, all of those that have taken part today. And if you'd like to get your certificate, you can inshallah visit this website, annasihah.com/webinar, answer the questions, and you'll be able to then make a payment and attain your certificate for this session. Jazakumullah khairah, and that's where we will finish. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.